Yo, what's up everyone? It's me again. Welcome back to another video. First of all, I want to apologize for the lack of streams recently. I've just been feeling kind of salty about the game in general, mostly due to the lack of loot from the League mechanic. But yeah, I've still been playing the game a little bit, just like on the side, and I cooked up this secret build, which I want to share with you guys today and just talk about the build and how it works, because I thought this build was like maybe a bit more unique than the other ones that I've done. But the main idea here is a Smite Occultist, and it sounds weird and bad, but as you just saw, it was actually it's not that bad. The damage is not as good as other meta builds this league, and the survivability and everything could be a bit better. But at the end of the day, I think this build has pretty solid defense and damage, which is kind of rare for an Occultist build. So I just wanted to kind of talk about the theory behind this build and why it works, and maybe share some findings about, playing this build. So the main idea of this build is to use a skill called Smite. And this basically, you attack and you make a lightning bolt. And one interaction with Smite that you might not know about is it actually does double hit in a similar way to Lightning Strike. It's very similar. You basically have to miss with your own attack and then have an additional strike. And then the melee damage from the additional strike can hit the enemy in addition to the lightning bolt from your primary strike. So it is a little bit finicky. It is harder to double strike with Smite compared to Lightning Strike, but sometimes it does work. And when it does work, you'll see 2 lightning bolts come down, and that's when you know it's double hitting. So that's the main idea of this skill. And Smite also has an interesting property where when you use Smite and you hit an enemy, it gives you an aura which grants you added lightning damage. And that aura is generic added lightning damage, so it adds damage to spells and attacks. And that's going to be like a fundamental building block of this build. So there's a bunch of weird, interesting mechanics that come together in this build. And the first, I guess I can just break it down into like offense and defense. So with regard to offense, the main idea is to use Smite as your primary skill. And to scale the damage of Smite, I decided to go full lightning and really take advantage of all the added lightning damage that you get. So here I have a weapon that has added lightning damage on it. And then I have the Smite aura, which gives me added 12 to 20 added lightning damage. I also have Wrath, which adds 16 to 248 lightning damage. And then I have a lightning golem, which gives me attack speed in addition to a little Wrath aura, which also adds a little bit of damage to the build. So that's the main idea. And by adding all this damage, you can take advantage of the changes to Smite this league, which is, same as the other melee skills, basically increasing the added damage effectiveness of the base gem. So that's how the main damage is scaled in this build, just adding a bunch of damage to Smite. And then one interesting thing as well is that when you have a build like this, which has so much generic added damage, you can actually take advantage of some spells as well. So for example, there is this new runecraft this league, trigger level 5 lightning bolt when you deal a critical strike. And if you look at lightning bolt here, if I type this in, lightning bolt, you can see that lightning bolt at level 5 has a very small amount of base damage. However, it has 400 effectiveness of added damage. So in this build, your Wrath aura, your added damage from the Smite thing, and also in this case, Spellblade, added lightning damage, and also Culling Strike. All of these things make Lightning Bolt deal like a little bit of damage as well. So it's not that much, but it does provide a lot of utility. You have an additional hit, which increases your uptime on frenzy charges. And then you also have 141 DPS from the Lightning Bolt. And also linking Culling Strike to it gives you a very reliable source of cull, which also increases your damage. So, and yeah, the links in your main hand weapon do apply to the Lightning Bolt trigger. So there's that. And then that's not all though. There's 2 more spells that this build also triggers. And a lot of this is, and the first one is Tempest Shield actually. So Tempest Shield is very good for this build. I'll talk about the defenses later using Svalinn, but this build does use block. And when you block, Tempest Shield will retaliate with a burst of lightning damage, as you can see here. And that lightning damage can be increased with, Smite Aura and adding lightning damage. So you have that as well. And then also, I decided to put Shock Nova, which is triggered on block. And Shock Nova, again, like with Smite Aura and Wrath Aura, you add a lot of damage to Shock Nova, and then you can even put a support gem in here as well. And that is like an additional trigger, which actually deals a bit of damage. So if I demonstrate here how this works exactly, let me just like pop a T16. Here we'll just go into this beach, and I want to just quickly demonstrate like how good the triggers are. So again, the main damage of this build is Smite, but by adding damage to the Tempest Shield retaliation thing and also Shock Nova, which is cast on block, you can actually have a very good amount of retaliate damage. So I'm just not going to attack at all, and you can see like how many things die, right? Like I'm not even attacking right now, and like things are dying. It's not enough damage to kill rares, but it is enough damage to kill like a lot of white mobs. As you can see, I'm not even attacking. Like I'm not even attacking right now, and the Shock Nova trigger in conjunction with the Tempest Shield is enough to kill a lot of stuff. Like white mobs will just instantly die to this, and then also the Profane Bloom due to Occultist is sometimes enough to kill rares as well. So you can actually clear a lot of a map without even attacking on this build, which is kind of cool. Like look at this, I'm not even attacking and things are dying, So that's like a very cool defensive and like, I guess, offensive layer as well. And it's even enough to kill blues. I'm just gonna stand in this pack of blues and not even attack. Oh, they're dead already. I'm not even gonna attack here. And look, everything's like dying. So this is like a pretty cool interaction, right? Like, as you can see, like it's not bad, And yeah, it's pretty good. So, and then the Smite, of course, is your primary damage dealer though. But my main, you can kind of see how good like all this retaliation trigger stuff is. And that is without Smite as well. Like when I attack with Smite, I gain an aura that adds lightning damage to everything. And that would make my retaliation stuff do even more damage. So like, it's very potent. It's very cool. So I was pretty happy with the way that this worked out. So that's the main idea of the offense behind this build. Smite, and then with all the added lightning damage, you can add lightning damage to Lightning Bolt, Tempest Shield, and Shock Nova, which is triggered on Svalinn. And that's how the offense of this build works. In addition, you have a couple of little offensive things from Occultist Ascendancy as well. Forbidden Power helps you get power charges and also gives you AoE and damage, which benefits Smite a lot, and also benefits Shock Nova and Lightning Bolt, because both are, I guess, AoE tagged. I think Lightning Bolt is AoE tagged. Yeah, it's area lightning damage. And then Profane Bloom helps your clear a lot, because Smite sometimes can have trouble killing stragglers. And then Unholy Authority gives you an additional curse, which in this build I'm using Blasphemy Conductivity, and that is free because I have Impresence, which makes Conductivity aura free. So that's the offense of this build. And then the scaling is just pretty generic stuff for a lightning damage build. The biggest thing here is that the build abuses volatility support. Every single damage in this build is lightning type. So volatility support gives you a huge amount of added maximum damage, while the downside is very minimal because lightning damage has low minimum and high maximum damage. And other than that, it's just elemental damage with attacks and crit. And as you can see, this build in terms of offense with Lightning Bolt and Smite has around 8 million Shaper DPS, assuming that you double hit. And that doesn't include the damage from all the triggers as well. And with all the crit scaling in this build, 94% crit chance, 477 multi, which is pretty good. And then a lot of the damage also comes in the form of the tincture, the good old ancestral tincture, which when you press this button, it doubles your DPS. And the tincture that I found the best for this build was a elemental damage with melee weapons tincture with attack speed. And the attack speed is really good because being an occultist is very difficult to scale attack speed. I don't even think I have any attack speed on the tree. So the attack speed on the tincture really helps a lot. And then, yeah, the tree is basically just like this. And, I guess also I can talk about the weapon. So this weapon is a little unconventional. And it turns out that between Wrath Aura and the Smite Aura, you add so much lightning damage to the build that when you use volatility support, it makes your maximum lightning roll really high. And that makes it very difficult to trigger Trinity support, which I thought was kind of interesting. So even when I tried to use a foil with cold damage and adding cold damage on my rings and my Abyssal Jewel, it was just not enough cold damage to trigger Trinity because the build had so much added lightning damage. So I decided to just drop Trinity completely and just go for just lightning damage. And, having physical converted to lightning turned out to be suboptimal in PoE as well, mostly just because it's awkward and annoying to convert all the fizz to lightning. And also you don't really need to when you can just add a lot of it on this build. So I decided to use a weapon like this. And the main idea of this weapon is it has the three most important stats are, of course, local attack speed, local crit chance, and added lightning damage. Ideally, these would be triple tier 1, which I think is possible this league using recombinators, but I recombinated a lot of stuff and I didn't get any good triple tier 1 stuff. So I just settled for tier 2, and tier 1. And then with those three important stats down, I would recommend multi-modding. Hits can't be evaded and penetration. Ellie Pen benefits your damage a lot. And also with hits can't be evaded, you can do a lot of cool stuff. You can drop precision entirely, and you can drop every single accuracy node on the tree, which give you 7 additional skill points in addition to more mana reservation. And basically I found a weapon like this to be optimal for this build. So that's how the offense works. Long story short is, add damage, crit, smite, hit for big damage, and then also you have some damage on the triggers as well. So yeah. And then another thing and then moving on to defense of this build. So the main idea behind the defense of this build revolves around using Svalinn, and this was a pretty lucky drop that I got this league. And the main idea I wanted to try out was if you could put Svalinn on a build, it's good because you can kind of scuff your block to a very high level and not have to invest into any other defenses. Then, without needing evasion, you can use a Glorious Vanity with the new energy shield bases, and you can get a huge amount of ES pool. And then with Glorious Vanity, Corrupted Soul, you can split the damage 50-50 between life and ES. And then because in this unique build, we have both spells and attacks, you can leech life from your attack and also mana. And then from your spells, you can leech energy shield. So that allows you to have double leech between life and ES. In addition, Occultist gives you ES regen and stun immune as long as you have ES, and you'll always have ES on this build. And you can basically accumulate a large EHP pool like this, and then your avoidance is carried by Svalinn, and you scuff the block to a very high level, which basically means get block in efficient ways that don't involve speccing into it on the tree. And then with regard to mitigation, you can run Flesh and Stone, and Flesh and Stone is really good on this build because at level 20 it gives you 19% less damage taken from enemies in the aura. In addition, you can run a Sigil of Power link, and the Sigil of Power, or not a link, but a 1-link Sigil of Power, and at maximum stages, this gives enemies and areas deal 16% less damage at level 6, which is what I found to be optimal for my build. So between Sigil of Power and Flesh and Stone, you actually have somewhere between like 30 to 45 less damage. Like enemies in these areas deal like 35 to 45% less damage. So that is how you get like mitigation in this build. So all of those things like combo together, you have a build where you have like in this case 7780 block after it is lucky from Svalinn. So you have like 7780 block, and then you have a EHP pool split between life and energy shield of like 7.5k total, which is pretty good EHP pool. And then Flesh and Stone and Sigil of Power give you like 40% mitigation to nearby enemies, basically. So that is the main idea of the defense behind this build. And you also have very good recovery with the life leech. I have 1.1k leech rate. And then for the energy shield leech, I have 700 energy shield leech. And in addition, I have energy shield regen from Vile Bastion. And if I'm mapping, if I kill an enemy, I get bonus regen as well. So if I killed a bunch of enemies in maps, I'll have 12%, well, not 12%, I'll have, wait, what is this? Yeah, 10%. I'll have 10% energy shield regeneration on top of the leech in mapping. So it's pretty good. Like you have a reasonable amount of leech and you have very good like mitigation and block. And the best thing ever is that you have these defenses for basically no investment, which is crazy. As you can see, I've basically taken no block on my entire tree. The only block I have on this tree is 1 jewel that provides 3% block attack and spell damage. Other than that, I have no block nodes in the tree, which is giga efficient. And the way that I got this high block is just like, again, scuffing it, which it basically means like get it in random places until it's good enough. So Tempest Shield is the main thing. Tempest Shield gives you shock immune, retaliate damage, which is boosted by all your added lightning damage, in addition to 25% chance to block spell damage. Really good. And then on your body armor, you can craft some block as well on the implicit and the explicit modifiers. So here I have 6% block attack and 8% block spell. And I also decided to go for the Tempest Shield increased buff effect, which gave me even more spell block. And then you have like a little bit of block on Svalinn as well, 14% chance to block spell damage. And then I think I have a little bit more block in some random places as well. Oh yeah, I decided to anoint Deflection on my Impresence. And Deflection is really good on this build because not only do you get attack block, but you also get 25% chance to gain an endurance charge when you block. This, combined with the Charge Mastery, gives you 100% increased charge duration. So these endurance charges last for like 20 seconds each. And I found that when I was mapping, I had 100% uptime on these endurance charges. And you actually have an excuse to take a Charge Mastery in this build because with Occultist, you have very good power charge scaling. So yeah. And then another underrated interaction with this build as well is by intentionally not reducing the mana cost of Smite and using a large floating free mana pool on this build, you can not only have more stages of your Sigil of Power faster, but you can also trigger power charges faster. It's kind of a weird interaction, but the main idea is you intentionally don't reduce the cost of Smite. This allows you to spend more mana, which allows you to run a higher level Sigil of Power, get more power charges from Forbidden Power, and also having a higher floating mana pool or like free mana pool allows you to have better uptime on your tincture, which as you can see is very important because it doubles your damage. So that is like another interaction of this build. And then, yeah, that's basically it. And then without needing to spend any points on the tree in armor or evasion or block or energy shield, you can like giga efficiently scale your life pool or your EHP pool and also your damage. So like the only defensive investment that I have is like an anointment, some block stuff on my gear, energy shield bases for the energy shield pool for the corrupted soul tech, and that's it. Like, I don't take any ES nodes in the tree basically, and it's just, I barely take any defensive nodes in the tree, and I have like pretty reasonable defense in this build. So that's the main idea of the build. It's kind of complicated, and it took me like 3 days to like get to this point. I did a lot of trial and error. It took me like 3 days to like get to this variant of the build, but as you can see, it's very optimal. It's very optimized. Like, there's a lot of different mechanics that come together to scale offense and defense efficiently in this build. And I think the result is a build that actually performs pretty good and has like pretty good numbers and performance. So yeah, that's basically the build. And then I guess if you want to look at the specifics, I'll definitely link this POB so you can check it out yourself. A lot of the gear is pretty straightforward. It's just ES bases with life ES and res. Svalinn, mandatory for the way that this build is built. The weapon, which I talked about earlier. In presence helps a lot in terms of allowing you to run conductivity and triggering profane bloom. If you didn't have this in presence, you would probably just drop flesh and stone and then maybe get some mana reservation on your helmet or take the influence wheel. That way you can run conductivity as a 35% aura, but in presence definitely helps a lot. And there isn't really another amulet that would like give you more damage than in presence. So I found this to be pretty good. And then the rings are just chaos res rings with life, and a little bit of damage if I could get it. Just normal belt, normal jewel, try to add lightning damage and stuff. A lot of my gear is also like missing mods because I ran out of freaking exalted orbs. But once I get some more exalted orbs, I would slam these things to make them have more mods. And then the flask setup is pretty straightforward. The only interesting flask is roomies. I decided to optimize my build around roomies. So like with Svalinn, your base non-lucky block can only go up to 65. So I decided to go for like 65 minus 12 and 65 minus 4 attack and spell block before lucky, respectively, if that makes sense. And that way I could get maximum value out of the roomies and mapping. So like when I press the roomies, my attack block lucky goes up, from 77 to 87, and the spell block from 80 to 83. And it's a pretty good thing. Like you don't need the roomies, I guess, but it's like if you have a flask that gives you block on a build that needs block, I just found it very efficient to like build around this. It just ended up like being really nice to have, additional block in mapping. So I did like optimize my non-lucky block numbers around the roomies, if that makes sense. And then, just Quicksilver for movement, Quartz for phasing, Life Flask for bleed immune, and then the tincture. And that's basically it. In a perfect world, I would have gain 3 charges when you're hit on these utility flasks. But in SSF, I just got really annoyed rolling for that, so I gave up. But yeah, ideally you would have that because when you block, then you can like replenish your flask charges, which is pretty good, but whatever. And then I guess I also decided to run a cluster setup. This ended up being really good. I just used like a lightning damage cluster. Not the most flashy cluster ever, but Overshock helps with damage and shock scaling. Widespread destruction, AoE good, elemental damage good. And then the 2 medium clusters I think are actually mandatory for the build as well. I decided to go with crit clusters so I could like get my crit closer to 100. And the main idea is, these 2 I believe are optimal. Pressure points is really good because the double damage makes your shocks bigger, and quick getaway just is really good. Again, this build doesn't have very much attack speed, so the attack speed, movement speed, and crit chance are all very welcome on this build. So that is the medium cluster that I decided to go for. And then for all these random 2-point jewel nodes, I guess that's another cool thing about the build, which is that you have a lot of potential for your like 2-point or 1-point jewel sockets. There's just a lot of good stuff that you could get. Like in a perfect world, you would probably have the jewels be like 7% life, attack block, spell block, and then either attack speed or multi. So there's like a lot of good stuff that you could get on these. So like this one, attack speed and damage. This is my worst one, but you know, SSF, so whatever. This one is really good because it has 3% block, attack, and spell damage in addition to a damage mod. Unfortunately, it doesn't have life, but whatever. This one is life, crit chance, dexterity, which helps a lot, and also a little bit of damage. And then this one is, you know, attributes, damage, life, and reduced ignite duration. The reason I decided to use this one, even though it's not very good, is that the reduced ignite duration synergizes with the Soul of Aberrath Pantheon to give you like 90% less duration of ignite, which is pretty good. Well, not exactly, because this is less and this is reduced. So it's not exactly, like, it doesn't exactly stack like that, but like it helps a lot, like protecting you from ignite. Oh, I guess I can also talk about ailment immunity while I'm on this subject. This should be Sand Stance, actually. So like, yeah. So for ailment protection on this build, I use, again, Soul of Aberrath in conjunction with a Jewel to get a lot of less ignite duration. Shocks you are immune from because of Tempest Shield. And then Brian King Pantheon makes you immune to being frozen, and also 50% reduced effective chill. And then I crafted 50% reduced effective chill on a ring, and that gives me 100% reduced effective chill. So that's pretty good. And then bleed immune is just on the life flask. Only thing I don't have immunity to is poison. And I guess poison is like kind of annoying for this build because it will go through the energy shield. And I only have like 4k life without the ES pool. So, you know, chaos damage is kind of annoying, but it's not that common, and you can just like not run maps with like chaos damage or poison. You also could, if you wanted to, take the energy shield mastery that is 30% chaos damage, does not bypass ES. And this apparently works with both dots and hits. So it's like, it should be pretty good to take this. I guess I probably should put that in my POB because it does help a lot to like protect you from chaos damage. I should probably have that, honestly. I'm going to add that to the POB. Yeah. So that is like an option to take this. You could also just like go for life nodes as well. Or like, yeah, basically. So, yeah. Okay, I think I covered everything. Oh, and then one also very random minor interaction is there is also some synergy between like ward in this build. Because if you have really high block, in theory, ward is kind of good for you. But I didn't think of any smart way to add a lot of ward to this build. So I'm just using like 125 ward from my shield. And it's not the most crazy interaction, but I mean, it basically reads like every 2 seconds you gain a barrier which mitigates incoming hits by 150 damage. Like mitigates one hit for that much damage. Not the most major thing. If you could get more ward, I think it would be good for the build. You could also experiment with using ward bases instead of ES bases on the helmet, glove, and boot slot. That would be pretty interesting as well, because you do have very high avoidance, so the ward may actually be beneficial. It would cause you to drop your ES pool by like 1,000, but you could probably get like a couple hundred more ward, which may or may not be better than the ES, because you don't really scale percent ES on this build. A lot of it is just flat. You have a big amount of flat from the body armor, and you have like a very small amount of increase in the tree, but the increase is only 43%. So yeah, that's like something that maybe would be worth exploring as well. Like what if you used ward bases? Would it be good because you have high avoidance? I don't know, but that's like an idea, I guess. So yeah, that's basically the build. And yeah, I think that's all. As you can see, it is T17 viable, but it's not the best build for farming T17s. It's mainly just like good for mapping, like in T16s. It can do easier T17s, and if you have like shrines, you can definitely do most T17s on this build. I think the defense, offense, and recovery are enough, but it's not like super high damage or super high defense. So, you know, like don't build this if you want to farm T17s, but it is pretty good at just like doing T16s, I think. So, yeah. Yeah, that's basically the build. And I guess to end the video, I'll just run like a Guardian map just to like show you guys how it plays in like a normal non-toxic T17 scenario. So we can just like run this map. I don't want to run hex. Wait, this hex proof actually doesn't matter for me, right? Because I'm an occultist. Yeah, so I can just like run this Minotaur map here and just show you guys like how the build plays in like a normal like T16 map environment, which is like what the build was designed for. It's like, oh, I already have this spec'd. So, okay, yeah, whatever. And yeah, I'm gonna mute my mic, play this map so you can see how it works. Other than that, POB will be in the description. Check it out if you want. Other than that, yep, just wanted to share the tech behind this build. Hope you guys enjoyed or maybe learned something. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video or possibly on stream if I can reduce my salt levels from getting the loot repeatedly from the league mechanic. But yep, all right, thank you guys for watching.
One of my captors felt no emotion. He did not hesitate to inflict pain. Now, all he feels is unstoppable agony.
Time and entropy stay progresses. Progenitor sword. Share the burden of the creator wade through time and fire. But the silence.
This is the key to a crucible that stretches the sanity of the mind.